The watch chimed midnight in Helena Greenfield's trembling hands, just as the stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the dusty town of San Jose, California. And she knew with absolute certainty that her entire life was about to change forever. The year was 1885, and the late September heat still clung to the air even as darkness blanketed the frontier settlement. Helena clutched her leather satchel closer, feeling the familiar weight of her tools inside. Gears, springs, tiny screwdrivers, and the half-finished pocket watch she had been assembling during the long journey from Boston. Clockmaking was more than her trade. It was her sanctuary, her purpose, the one thing that made sense in a world that had grown increasingly cruel after her father's death. The advertisement had been simple enough. Rancher seeking wife, must be of good character and willing to work. Children possible. She had responded with equal simplicity, outlining her skills, her age of 23 years, and her willingness to leave everything behind for a fresh start. What she had not mentioned was the debt collectors circling her father's shop like vultures, or the landlord who had looked at her with eyes that made her skin crawl, or the suffocating certainty that staying in Boston meant surrendering every shred of dignity she possessed. The driver appeared at the coach door, his weathered face barely visible in the lamplight. "San Jose, miss. End of the line for you." Helena stepped down onto the packed earth, her traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of dust. The town was smaller than she had imagined. A handful of buildings lined the main street, most dark at this late hour. A saloon still blazed with light and noise, tinny piano music drifting through the swinging doors. The general store stood silent beside it, and further down she could make out what appeared to be a livery stable. "You are Miss Greenfield." The voice came from the shadows near the stagecoach office, deep and cautious. She turned, heart hammering. "Yes. Are you Mr. Vaughn?" The man who stepped into the lamplight was not what she expected. Tall, yes, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor, but younger than his letters had suggested. Perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of whiskey. He held his hat in his hands, twisting the brim with what appeared to be genuine nervousness. "Carter Vaughn, madam, I appreciate you making the journey." His voice carried a slight Texas drawl, soft and unhurried. "I know it is late. I have a room arranged for you at the boarding house. Tomorrow, when you are rested, we can talk proper." Helena studied him, trying to reconcile this hesitant cowboy with the confident words of his letters. That seemed sensible. He reached for her trunk, hefting it easily onto his shoulder. "This way, madam." They walked in silence through the sleeping town. Helena was acutely aware of the sound of her boots on the wooden sidewalk, the distant howl of a coyote, the way Carter Vaughn kept a respectful 3 feet of distance between them. The boarding house was a modest 2-story structure with a painted sign that read, "Mrs. Chen's Lodging." Carter knocked gently, and within moments the door opened to reveal a Chinese woman of perhaps 50 years, her face composed despite the late hour. "Miss Greenfield has arrived," Carter said. "The room we discussed," Mrs. Chen nodded, her sharp eyes assessing Helena with obvious interest. "Come in, please, I have tea ready." Inside, the boarding house was clean and surprisingly comfortable. Mrs. Chen led Helena up the narrow stairs to a small room with a bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Carter deposited her trunk just inside the door. "I will call tomorrow afternoon," he said, addressing the floorboards more than Helena herself. "Give you time to settle." "Mr. Vaughn." Helena found her voice stronger now. "I appreciate your consideration." He nodded once and was gone, his footsteps retreating down the stairs. Mrs. Chen lingered in the doorway. "He is a good man," the older woman said. "Quiet, Works hard. Lost his parents 5 years back to fever. The ranch struggles, but he keeps it going. Helena absorbed this information. You know why I am here. The whole town knows. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. Do not let that worry you. San Jose is small. Everyone knows everything. But we take care of our own, and you are here now. That makes you one of us. After Mrs. Chen departed, Helena sat on the edge of the bed and carefully unpacked her tools. The familiar ritual soothed her jangled nerves. She laid out each implement in precise order, checking for damage from the journey. Everything was intact. The half-finished pocket watch gleamed in the lamplight, its exposed gears a beautiful complexity of brass and steel. She had learned the trade from her father, who had learned it from his father before him. The Greenfield name had meant something in Boston once: precision, reliability, artistry. 3 generations of clockmakers, and she was the last. The only one who could hear the song in the gears, who understood that time was not just measurement but music, each second a note in an infinite symphony. Sleep came eventually, though her dreams were filled with ticking and the uncertain face of the cowboy who had paid for her passage west. Morning arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through the thin curtains. Helena washed at the basin, changed into a fresh dress of deep blue cotton and braided her honey-colored hair. Downstairs, Mrs. Chen had prepared breakfast: eggs, rice, and strong black tea. The general store opens at 8, Mrs. Chen said, settling across from Helena with her own cup of tea. Mrs. Patterson runs it. She will want to meet you. Should I be nervous? Helena Patterson is direct but fair. She has run that store since her husband died in '63, fighting for the Union. Raised 3 sons alone. She respects hard work. Helena spent the morning exploring San Jose. The town was larger in daylight than it had appeared the previous night, though still modest by any measure. Besides the saloon and general store, there was a blacksmith's forge, a small church, a one-room schoolhouse, and a handful of homes scattered around the main street. The surrounding landscape was golden hills dotted with oak trees, beautiful in its stark simplicity. At the general store, Helena Patterson proved to be exactly as described, a sturdy woman of perhaps 60 with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked up from her ledger as Helena entered. "You must be the bride," she said without preamble. "Helena Greenfield from Boston." "Yes, madam. Carter Vaughn is a good man. His ranch is 3 miles north, cattle mostly. He has been running it alone since his parents passed, with occasional help from the Martinez brothers when he can afford to pay them." Helena set down her pen. "What are your skills?" Helena appreciated the directness. "I am a clockmaker. My father trained me. I can repair watches, build them from components, work with fine mechanisms." Helena's eyebrows rose. "A clockmaker? Well, that is unusual." She paused, considering. "There is no one within 50 miles who can repair a decent timepiece. Everyone sends things to Sacramento or San Francisco. You might find work here if you are good." "I am good. Show me." Helena had anticipated this. She drew out a lady's pendant watch from her pocket, a piece she had repaired on the stagecoach when a fellow passenger had complained it no longer kept proper time. This was running 6 minutes slow per day. The escapement wheel had a bent tooth. I straightened it and adjusted the balance spring. Helena took the watch, examining it closely. She pulled a larger pocket watch from her own apron and compared the two. "They match, exactly." Her expression shifted to something like respect. "You have true skill." "My father used to say that time is the only thing we cannot buy more of, so keeping it accurately is sacred work." "Your father was wise." Helena handed back the pendant watch. "Carter comes to town most Saturdays for supplies. He should be here around 2 this afternoon. In the meantime, would you mind looking at something for me?" She disappeared into the back room and returned with an ornate mantel clock, its wooden case beautiful but its face frozen at 3:30. "This belonged to my mother. It stopped working 2 years ago." Helena examined the clock carefully, opening the back panel to study the movement. The problem was immediately apparent. "The mainspring has broken. I can replace it, but I would need to order the part from San Francisco. It would take perhaps 2 weeks to arrive, another day to install it properly." "How much would you charge?" Helena named a fair price, and Helena agreed without hesitation. "Consider this your first commission in San Jose." The afternoon found Helena back at the boarding house, attempting to calm her nerves. Mrs. Chen had offered her tea and conversation, but Helena found herself too restless to sit still. She had taken out her tools again, working on the pocket watch, when the knock came at the door. Carter Vaughn stood in the hallway, hat in hand once more, looking no less nervous than he had the previous night. In the daylight, Helena could see more details. The sun-weathered skin, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands were calloused from work but clean, the nails trimmed. "Miss Greenfield, would you walk with me?" They strolled through town, an appropriate distance maintained between them. Carter was not talkative by nature, Helena realized, but the silence was not uncomfortable. He pointed out various landmarks, his voice low and measured. The church was built in 72. Pastor Williams holds services on Sundays, though he also rides a circuit to 2 other towns, so sometimes we go without. The schoolteacher is Miss Alice Porter. She is from Ohio originally and has been here 3 years. "How long have you lived in San Jose?" "I was born here. My father claimed the ranch land in 58 before I came along. It was wild country then, dangerous. It has settled some, but it is still hard living." They reached the edge of town where the land opened up into rolling grassland. Carter stopped, staring at the horizon. "I should be honest with you, Miss Greenfield. The ranch is not prosperous. I keep it running, but there is little extra. I work from sunup to sundown most days. I can offer you a home, food, safety. I would treat you with respect, but I cannot promise luxury or ease." Helena considered this. "My father died 6 months ago. He left debts I could not pay. I sold everything that was not essential to my trade, but it was not enough. There was a man, the building landlord, who suggested I might work off the debt in other ways." She met Carter's eyes steadily. "I chose to come here instead. I do not need luxury. I need a place where my skills matter and my person is respected." Something shifted in Carter's expression. "I can promise you that. Respect always. Then perhaps we have the beginning of an understanding." He smiled for the first time, and it transformed his entire face. "Perhaps we do." They walked back to town, and this time the conversation came easier. Carter told her about the ranch, the 40 head of cattle he was currently running, the vegetable garden that his mother had started and that he tried to maintain with limited success. Helena told him about clockmaking, about the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again, about the mathematics of gears and the artistry of balance. "I would like to see your work sometime," Carter said. "I am repairing a clock for Mrs. Patterson. When it is finished, you could see that." "I would like that." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Carter came to town every few days, always finding an excuse. Supplies he needed, a tool to borrow from the blacksmith, a question for Pastor Williams. Each time, he would stop by the boarding house and invite Helena for a walk or a meal at the small restaurant run by the Martinez family. Helena, for her part, had established herself quickly in San Jose. The mantel clock repair for Helena Patterson had been completed perfectly, and word had spread. Soon she was fielding requests from across the county. Pocket watches, wall clocks, even a complicated anniversary clock that had been shipped from Germany. She worked from a corner table in the boarding house parlor, and people came to her with their broken timepieces and left with them restored. She saved most of what she earned, knowing that eventually she would need to make a decision about Carter's proposal. They had not spoken of marriage again directly, but it hung between them, a question waiting to be answered. One evening in late October, Carter arrived at the boarding house with a wrapped package. Helena was working on a railroad conductor's watch, a precision piece that required her full attention, but she set it aside when Mrs. Chen showed him in. "I brought you something," he said, offering the package with an expression of nervous hope. Inside was a leather tool case, beautifully crafted with individual pockets for each implement. The leather was soft and well-oiled, the stitching perfect. "I noticed your tools are kept in that cloth roll," Carter said. "I thought something more protective might be useful. The leather is from one of our own steers, and I asked Samuel Chen to make it. He is Mrs. Chen's nephew and does leather work." Helena ran her fingers over the case, genuinely touched. "This is beautiful, thank you. You are welcome." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw not just the nervous cowboy or the struggling rancher, but a man who paid attention, who noticed details, who tried to show care in concrete ways. "Carter, would you like to see how a watch is assembled?" His face lit up. "Very much." She spent the next hour showing him the intricacies of watchmaking, explaining how each component fit together, how the escapement regulated the flow of power from the spring, how the gear ratios determined the movement of the hands. Carter listened with intense focus, asking intelligent questions, his fingers gentle when she let him hold the tiny components. "It is like a ranch in a way," he said finally. "Everything has to work together. If one part fails, the whole system breaks down." "Exactly." Helena felt a warmth spreading through her chest. "My father used to say that a good clockmaker understands systems, not just the individual pieces, but how they relate to each other." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. I miss him every day." Carter's hand covered hers briefly, a gesture of comfort. "I understand. I still expect to hear my mother calling me for dinner sometimes, or my father's voice from the barn." The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Then Mrs. Chen appeared with tea and the spell broke, but something had shifted. Some barrier had come down. November brought cooler weather and rain. Helena's business continued to grow, and she began to consider what a permanent shop might look like. Helena Patterson had mentioned that the space next to the general store was available. A small room that had once been a seamstress's establishment before the seamstress had married and moved to Sacramento. "You should take it," Helena said one afternoon when Helena came to deliver a repaired cuckoo clock. "You have enough business to justify the rent, and you cannot work from Mrs. Chen's parlor forever. I have been thinking about it. And you have been thinking about Carter Vaughn." It was not a question. Helena smiled ruefully. "Is my thinking so obvious, only to anyone with eyes?" Helena's expression softened. "He is a good man, Helena, better than most. He has been alone too long, trying to prove he can manage everything himself. His father was like that too." Stubborn pride mixed with genuine strength. "I care for him," Helena admitted, "but I also know that marriage is a serious commitment. I want to be certain." "Certainty is a luxury few of us can afford," Helena said, "but trust can be built, and I see how he looks at you." "I see how you look at him too." That evening, Carter appeared at the boarding house with an unusual request. "There is a dance next Saturday. The town holds one every few months in the church hall. Would you accompany me?" Helena had not danced in years, not since before her father's illness, but she agreed. Mrs. Chen helped her alter one of her better dresses, letting out a seam here, adding a bit of lace there, until Helena had something suitable for a social occasion. The night of the dance, Carter arrived in a wagon instead of on horseback. He wore clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his hair neatly combed, and he offered his hand to help Helena up onto the wagon seat with careful courtesy. The church hall was transformed. Lanterns hung from the rafters, and someone had decorated with branches of oak leaves and late-blooming wildflowers. A small band played fiddle, guitar, and accordion. The whole town seemed to have turned out. Families, couples, single men and women all mingling together. Carter was not a graceful dancer, but he was earnest, and Helena found herself laughing as they navigated a reel. Between dances, people came to introduce themselves properly. The Martinez brothers, Juan and Miguel, who helped Carter with roundup. Miss Alice Porter, the schoolteacher, a lively woman of perhaps 25 with intelligent eyes and a quick wit. Pastor Williams and his wife, a gentle couple who had served the community for 15 years. During a slower song, Carter pulled Helena closer, his hand warm on her waist. "Are you glad you came to San Jose?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, and realized it was true. "I am. I would like to ask you something, not now but soon. Will you hear me out when I do?" Her heart beat faster. "Yes. Good." The dance ended near midnight, and Carter drove Helena back to the boarding house. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. At the door, he took both her hands in his. "I know we have only known each other 2 months," he said, "but I think about you constantly. I think about how you look when you are concentrating on a watch, how you explain things with such patience, how you have found a place here so quickly. I think about coming home and having you there. Not just someone to cook and clean, but a partner. Someone who understands that life is made up of small moments, precise as clockwork." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. "Carter, I think about you too, about your kindness, your steadiness, the way you notice things, the way you try so hard at everything you do. Then marry me, please. Not because of any arrangement or necessity, but because I have come to care for you deeply, and I think you might care for me too." "I do care for you," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and tentative, and Helena felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. This strange journey across the country, this unlikely match, this man who had been a stranger and was now becoming everything. They decided to marry in December, giving themselves time to make proper preparations. Carter spent every spare moment building an addition onto the ranch house, a room that could serve as Helena's workshop. He installed large windows for good light and built shelves and a workbench to her precise specifications. Helena, meanwhile, worked with Mrs. Chen and Helena Patterson to prepare for the wedding itself. It would be small, just the townspeople who had become her friends, but she wanted it to be meaningful. She made one special item, matching pocket watches for herself and Carter, assembled from the finest components she could acquire. Inside each case she engraved a single word. His said precision, her said timing. The night before the wedding, Helena Patterson hosted a dinner for Helena at her home. It was a warm gesture, a way of welcoming her fully into the community. "I want to tell you something," Helena said over dessert. "About timing and chances. My husband and I met in a single afternoon. He was passing through Boston where I lived, and I served him at my father's restaurant. We talked for 3 hours, and at the end of it, he asked me to marry him and come west. Everyone thought I was mad to accept, but I knew. Sometimes you just know." "Were you happy?" Deliriously. "For 11 years, until the war took him from me, but I would not trade those years for anything." "Love is always a gamble, Helena, but some gambles are worth taking. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Helena dressed in a new gown of deep green velvet, her hair arranged in a simple style with small white flowers tucked into the braids. Mrs. Chen lent her a pearl necklace that had belonged to her own grandmother. The church was full when Helena arrived. She walked down the aisle alone, carrying a small bouquet of winter roses that Carter had somehow procured. He stood at the front in a new suit, his eyes bright with emotion. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony with warmth and sincerity. The vows were traditional, but when Carter promised to love and cherish Helena for all their days, his voice shook with genuine feeling. When Helena made the same promise, she meant every word. They exchanged the watches afterward, and Carter understood immediately when he read the inscription. "Precision and timing," he said. "We needed both to find each other." Exactly. The reception was held in the church hall, with food contributed by everyone in town. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts. As the sun set, Carter took Helena's hand. "Ready to go home, home." The word settled around her like a blessing. Yes. The ranch house was modest but well built, with the new workshop addition gleaming with fresh paint. Carter had lit a fire in the hearth, and lamplight glowed warm through the windows. He carried Helena over the threshold, an old tradition that made her laugh. That night, they came together with tenderness and wonder, learning each other slowly. Carter was patient and gentle, and Helena felt something unlock inside her, years of fear and caution giving way to trust and desire. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt truly safe for the first time since her father's death. "I love you," Carter whispered against her hair. "I did not know I could feel this way." "I love you too," Helena replied. "You brought me back to life." The winter months were a time of adjustment and discovery. Helena established her workshop, and customers began coming to the ranch itself for repairs. Carter worked the ranch with renewed energy, and on the evenings when weather permitted, he would sit in Helena's workshop and watch her work, sometimes helping with simple tasks, always interested in what she was creating. They developed rhythms together. Morning coffee shared in quiet companionship. Meals prepared together, Carter learning to cook beyond basic survival fare under Helena's patient instruction. Evenings by the fire, reading aloud or simply talking. The physical intimacy deepened too, becoming a language of its own, a way they expressed what words could not quite capture. In February, the Martinez brothers asked if Helena could repair their father's old pocket watch, a family heirloom that had stopped working years ago. She agreed, and when Miguel came to pick it up, he brought news. "There has been trouble with cattle rustlers north of here," he said. "Several ranches hit. Carter should be careful." That night, Helena watched as Carter cleaned and loaded his rifle, a grim expression on his face. "I will not let anyone steal from us," he said. "We have worked too hard." "Please be careful," Helena said. "Cattle can be replaced, you cannot." He kissed her forehead. "I will be careful, I promise." The rustlers struck a week later, making off with 10 head of cattle in the night. Carter and the Martinez brothers tracked them for 2 days but lost the trail in rough country. Carter returned home frustrated and exhausted. "Those cattle represented a quarter of our breeding stock," he said, slumping at the kitchen table. "It sets us back significantly." Helena brought him coffee and sat across from him. "We will manage. I have been thinking about expanding my business. If I advertise in Sacramento and San Francisco newspapers, I could get mail order repairs. The income would help offset the loss." Carter looked at her with something like awe. "You would do that. We are partners, are we not? Your struggles are my struggles." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I do not deserve you." "You deserve everything good," Helena said fiercely. "And we will build something strong together. I know it." True to her word, Helena placed advertisements in city newspapers, offering expert clock and watch repair by mail. Within a month, packages began arriving and her workshop became busier than ever. The income was substantial, enough to ease the financial pressure on the ranch. Spring brought new life. The remaining cattle calved successfully, and Carter managed to purchase 3 additional head from a rancher near Sacramento who was selling out. The vegetable garden flourished under Helena's attention, her precise nature translating well to the careful timing required for successful planting. In April, Helena realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week to be certain, then told Carter over dinner. "I believe I am with child." Carter froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "Truly, I am fairly certain, yes." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "A baby, our baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "I cannot believe it." "Believe it," Helena said, laughing and crying at the same time. "You are going to be a father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Helena continued her work through the summer, her skilled hands as steady as ever even as her belly grew round. The town rallied around them with support and advice, particularly the women who had children of their own. Lena Patterson gave her a beautiful handmade cradle that had rocked 3 generations. "It is sturdy," she said, "like the love that made it, Mrs." Chen taught her about herbs and teas that would ease the discomforts of late pregnancy. Alice Porter brought books about child development and education, already planning for the baby's eventual schooling. Carter was attentive to the point of hovering. He insisted Helena rest more, worry less, let him handle every heavy task. She found it endearing even when it was frustrating. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she reminded him when he tried to prevent her from lifting a package of watch components. "I know, but I cannot help worrying. You are precious to me, and so is our child." How could she argue with that? The baby came in early November, a year and a week after Helena had first arrived in San Jose. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Chen, who had experience as a midwife, and Dr. Morrison, who had ridden from the next town when Carter had sent word. Helena had never known such pain existed, but she also had never known such determination. With Carter holding her hand, whispering encouragement, she pushed their child into the world just as dawn broke across the California hills. "A boy," Dr. Morrison announced, placing the squalling infant on Helena's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Helena looked down at the tiny red face, the perfect fingers that grasped at air, and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. Carter was crying openly, his hand gentle on their son's downy head. "He is perfect," Carter whispered. "You are perfect, thank you." They named him Charles William Vaughn, after both their fathers. Charlie, they called him, and from the first day he was his own person, loud and demanding and absolutely beloved. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and exhilarating. Helena learned to work in shorter shifts, assembling watch components while Charlie slept in his cradle beside her workbench. Carter learned to change diapers and walk the floor at night, singing off key lullabies that somehow always soothed Charlie back to sleep. "I never knew I could love anything this much," Carter said one night, holding Charlie against his shoulder while Helena finished a repair. "It is terrifying and wonderful at the same time." "I feel the same," Helena admitted. "I look at him and think about all the things that had to happen to bring us to this moment. If I had not left Boston, if you had not placed that advertisement, if the timing had been different in 1,000 small ways." "But it was not different," Carter said. "The timing was perfect. It brought you to me." As Charlie grew, so did the ranch and Helena's business. The cattle herd increased steadily, and Carter hired Juan Martinez permanently to help with the increased workload. Helena's reputation as a clockmaker spread throughout Northern California, and she found herself taking on apprentice work, teaching a young man from town named David right the intricacies of the trade. "You have a gift for this," she told David after watching him successfully replace a balance wheel. "True precision requires patience and attention, and you have both." David, 19 and earnest, flushed with pleasure. "I want to learn everything you can teach me, Mrs. Vaughn." "Then we will make sure you do." Charlie's first birthday was celebrated with the whole town, a testament to how deeply the Vaughn family had woven themselves into the fabric of San Jose. Eleanor Patterson made a cake. The Martinez family brought music, and Alice Porter gave Charlie a beautiful set of wooden blocks that Carter's father had carved years ago, which she had kept safe all this time. "To think," Eleanor said, watching Charlie smash cake into his hair with gleeful abandon. "A year ago he was not even born, and now we cannot imagine this town without him." Helena met Carter's eyes across the happy chaos and saw her own contentment reflected back. They had built something extraordinary together. Not just a family, but a life rich with purpose and connection. That night, after Charlie was asleep and the house was quiet, Carter and Helena sat on the porch watching the stars. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Carter asked. "Sometimes. But then I remember that every choice I made, even the painful ones, led me here, to you, to Charlie, to this life that fits me so perfectly." "I think about the timing," Carter said. "How you answered my advertisement exactly when you did. How we met exactly when we were both ready. It is like your clocks, Helena. Everything had to align precisely. My father used to say that the universe has its own timing, and fighting it only breaks the mechanism. I think he was right. We were meant to find each other." "Precision and timing," Carter murmured, echoing the inscriptions on their wedding watches. "Exactly." The years flowed by like a river, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. A second child arrived when Charlie was 3, a daughter they named Grace Catherine, who had Carter's dark hair and Helena's precise way of examining everything. Then another son 2 years later, Henry Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful from birth. The ranch prospered. Carter's hard work and Juan's loyal assistance built the herd to over 100 head. They added horses too, breeding quality stock that sold well to the army and to ranchers throughout the state. The vegetable garden expanded into a proper farm plot, providing not just for the family but produce they could sell in town. Helena's workshop became known throughout California and beyond. She took on 2 more apprentices over the years, training them in the art of precision timekeeping. David Wright eventually opened his own shop in Sacramento, and Helena felt a fierce pride in his success. She began designing her own watch movements, innovations that improved accuracy and reliability. A San Francisco jeweler started carrying Greenfield Vaughn timepieces, her married name now synonymous with quality. Charlie grew into a serious boy who loved both ranching and mechanical things, often dividing his time between helping his father with the cattle and watching his mother assemble watch movements. Grace was fearless and curious, always climbing trees or exploring the furthest reaches of the ranch. Henry was the family scholar, reading everything he could get his hands on and asking questions that required thoughtful answers. One evening, when Charlie was 12 and helping Helena in the workshop, he asked, "Mother, how did you know Father was the right person to marry?" Helena considered the question carefully. "I did not know, not at first, but I paid attention to how he treated me, how he spoke about his responsibilities, how he acted when things were difficult. He was consistent, kind, and honest. Those things mattered more than grand gestures or pretty words. Do you love him? More than I can express. Love grows, Charlie. It is not just a moment of feeling. It is 1,000 small choices to prioritize someone else's happiness, to work together toward shared goals, to forgive mistakes and celebrate victories. Charlie nodded slowly. Like a watch mechanism, all the parts working together, Helena smiled. Exactly like that. The town of San Jose grew too. New families arrived, new businesses opened. The railroad came through in 1895, bringing easier access to markets and supplies. Pastor Williams retired, replaced by a young minister fresh from seminary. Helena Patterson finally handed over the general store to her youngest son, though she still came in most days to offer advice and keep an eye on things. Through it all, Helena and Carter's love deepened and matured. They knew each other's habits and quirks, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, found comfort in the simple fact of each other's presence. Their physical intimacy remained a source of connection and pleasure, though it took on a different character as they aged, becoming less urgent but no less meaningful. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Carter took Helena back to the spot where he had first proposed, a small rise overlooking the ranch. The house had expanded over the years, with additions and improvements. The barn was larger, the corrals well maintained. Cattle dotted the golden hills, and in the distance they could see Charlie riding fence line with Juan. "When I brought you here that first time," Carter said, "I was so nervous. I thought you might refuse, might realize what a hard life I was offering and return to Boston." "I had nothing to return to," Helena reminded him, "but you had a choice. You chose this, chose me. I have never taken that for granted." Helena leaned into him. "You know what I have learned. Timing is not just about the right moment. It is about being ready to recognize opportunity when it appears, being brave enough to take a chance. We were both ready, even if we did not fully realize it." "I was so lonely before you came," Carter admitted, "working myself to exhaustion every day just to avoid feeling it. You brought joy back into my life, purpose beyond simple survival. You gave me a home when I was homeless, a family when I was alone. Skills are nothing without someone to share them with." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Then Carter pulled out a small box from his pocket. "I had this made in Sacramento," he said. "An anniversary gift." Inside was a pendant watch, beautifully crafted, clearly made by someone who understood precision work. When Helena opened it, she found a photograph inside, their wedding day somehow captured and preserved. On the opposite side was an engraving, 15 years of perfect timing, I love you, CV. Helena felt tears stream down her face. "It is beautiful, perfect. You are beautiful, perfect. Every day with you is a gift." She kissed him then, deep and lingering, tasting 15 years of shared history, the salt of happy tears and the promise of more years to come. The children grew and found their own paths. Charlie, as expected, took over increasing responsibility on the ranch, working alongside his father with the same steady determination. But he also had a gift for mechanics, and he began experimenting with farm machinery, finding ways to make the ranch operations more efficient. Grace surprised everyone by announcing at 16 that she wanted to go to college, something almost unheard of for women at the time. But Helena and Carter had raised her to believe she could do anything, and they found a way to make it happen. She went to San Francisco to study science, eventually becoming a teacher herself, bringing her fierce intelligence to a whole new generation of students. Henry's love of books led him to law. He clerked for a judge in Sacramento. then opened a small practice helping ranchers and farmers navigate the increasingly complex legal landscape of land ownership and water rights. Through all of it, Helena and Carter were the steady center, the foundation from which their children launched themselves into the world. They attended graduations and weddings, welcomed grandchildren, celebrated successes, and weathered failures together. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Charlie and his wife Maria had 3 children. Grace, though unmarried, brought her closest friend and teaching partner, another woman named Sarah. In a relationship Helena understood was far deeper than friendship, and which she accepted with the same practical love she brought to everything. Henry and his wife Ruth had just welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Helena. The party was large and chaotic, multiple generations mixing together. Helena Patterson was there, now in her 80s but still sharp-tongued and observant. Mrs. Chen, slowed by age but present with her extended family. Juan Martinez and his children. Alice Porter, long since married to the town's doctor and mother to 4. The entire community that had welcomed a frightened mail-order bride so many years ago. As the sun set, Carter stood and called for quiet. "I want to say something," he announced, pulling Helena to her feet beside him. 25 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a wife. I was desperate and lonely and convinced I would spend my life alone. When Helena answered, I thought I was just getting a capable woman who could help run a household. He turned to face her, his eyes bright. What I actually got was a partner, a love, a best friend. Someone who made every day brighter, who built businesses and raised children and created beauty in the world. Someone who taught me that timing is everything, and that sometimes the universe aligns exactly as it should. Helena felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You gave me a home," she said to the assembled crowd. "All of you did. When I stepped off that stagecoach in 1885, I was broken and scared. This town, this man, this life put me back together. More than that, you helped me become more than I ever could have been alone." Carter raised his glass. "To timing, to love, to the many years ahead." "To timing and love," the crowd echoed. Later, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet, Helena and Carter sat in her workshop. She had kept it all these years, even as apprentices came and went, even as her children grew and her business evolved. It was her sanctuary, the place where she felt most herself. Carter watched as she made minor adjustments to a complicated movement, his expression one of deep contentment. "Do you remember teaching me about clockwork that first time? In Mrs. Chen's parlor, of course. You were so focused, so genuinely interested." "That was when I knew I loved you," Carter said quietly. "Watching you explain something you cared about with such passion, seeing your hands move with such precision. I thought, this is what love looks like. This certainty, this skill, this devotion to getting things exactly right." Helena set down her tools and moved to sit beside him. "I knew I loved you the night of that first dance. You were so earnest, trying so hard to do everything correctly. And then you asked me that question. Are you glad you came to San Jose? The way you asked it, like my happiness actually mattered to you, not just whether I would fulfill my role as a wife. That was when I knew." "We have been so lucky," Carter said. "We have been blessed," Helena corrected. "But we have also worked for this. Every day, choosing each other, choosing to build something together. That is not luck. That is commitment." As they sat together in the lamplight, surrounded by the tools of Helena's trade and the memories of a quarter-century together, Helena thought about time. Not just the mechanical measurement of hours and minutes, but the lived experience of moments strung together into a life. Every tick of a clock was a choice. A chance to pay attention, to care, to act with intention. She and Carter had built their marriage the same way she built a watch, with precision, patience, and profound respect for how each component affected the whole. The years continued to accumulate, each one adding depth and texture to their shared story. There were losses, of course. Helena Patterson passed away peacefully at 87, leaving behind a legacy of strength and kindness. Mrs. Chen followed 2 years later, her funeral attended by seemingly everyone in Northern California who had ever been touched by her wisdom and generosity. Juan Martinez retired from active ranch work, though he still came by most days to offer advice and tell stories to the grandchildren. But there were joys too. More grandchildren, eventually great-grandchildren. Charlie expanded the ranch, purchasing additional land and building it into one of the most successful operations in the region. Grace's school in San Francisco became known for its progressive approach to education, and Sarah was honored by the state for her contributions to science curricula. Henry's law practice grew, and he was eventually appointed to a judgeship, carrying on his grandmother Helena's dedication to fairness and justice. Through it all, Helena continued her work. Her hands grew less steady with age, but her eye for precision never faltered. She trained more apprentices, wrote articles about watchmaking for trade journals, and designed increasingly sophisticated movements. The Greenfield Vaughn name became synonymous not just with quality but with innovation. Carter's work on the ranch slowed as he aged, but his satisfaction in what he had built never diminished. He and Charlie worked together seamlessly, the ranch prospering under their joint stewardship. He took pride in his children's accomplishments, in his grandchildren's laughter, in the community he had helped build. On their 40th anniversary, they were surrounded by 4 generations of family. Helena was 63 now, her honey-colored hair gone silver. Carter was 68, his face deeply lined by sun and smile, but when they looked at each other they still saw the nervous young people who had taken a chance on love. 40 years, Helena marveled. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, sometimes it feels like yesterday. Both, Carter said. That is the strange thing about time. It passes and yet it is always with us. The past is prologue, Helena quoted. Everything that came before led to everything that came after. Their youngest grandchild, a girl of 6 named Emma, climbed into Helena's lap. Grandma, tell the story about how you and Grandpa met. It was a story the family never tired of hearing, embellished and refined over the years until it had taken on the quality of legend. Well, Helena began, it started with perfect timing. Your grandfather needed a wife and I needed a home. We were strangers who became friends, friends who became partners, partners who became everything to each other. But how did you know you were in love? Emma asked, her young face serious. Carter fielded this one. Love is not always something you know right away. Sometimes it creeps up on you. You wake up one morning and realize that the person next to you has become essential to your happiness, that their dreams matter as much as your own, that you would rather face difficulties together than face ease alone. Your grandfather is very wise, Helena said, kissing Carter's weathered hand. Your grandmother taught me everything I know about precision, Carter countered, including how to precisely calculate how lucky I am. The family celebration stretched into the evening, filled with music and dancing and stories. As the stars came out, Helena stood on the porch of the ranch house they had shared for 40 years, looking out over land they had worked together to nurture and improve. Carter joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the cool night air. What are you thinking about? About that frightened girl who stepped off the stage coach so many years ago, about how impossible all of this would have seemed to her. 3 children, 9 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren so far, a successful business, a ranch that flourishes, a community that feels like family. You made all of that happen, Carter said. We made it happen, Helena corrected. Together, that is what partnership means. I love you, Carter said, the same words he had spoken thousands of times but which never lost their power. I love you more now than I did 40 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. I love you, Helena replied. You were the right person at the right time, and every day since has proven it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the lights in their family's homes scattered across the ranch property. Charlie's house on the western edge, the smaller cottage where Henry and Ruth stayed when they visited, the barn where Grace had spent hours as a child dreaming of adventures. We built something that lasts, Carter observed. Not just buildings or businesses, but family, legacy, love that extends beyond ourselves. That is the best kind of precision, Helena said. Not just keeping time, but making time meaningful. As they turned to go back inside, back to the warmth and laughter of their family, Helena felt a profound sense of completion. Not ending, but fulfillment. The story that had begun with a desperate advertisement and a frightened response had grown into something beautiful and enduring. She had come to California seeking safety and found purpose. She had married seeking security and found love. She had worked her trade with precision, and in return, life had given her exactly what she needed exactly when she needed it. Timing, she had learned, was everything. And their timing had been perfect. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. Helena and Carter aged together gracefully, their bond deepening with each passing season. They faced the inevitable challenges of growing older with the same partnership that had defined their marriage. Carter supporting Helena when arthritis made her fine work more difficult. Helena caring for Carter when an old injury to his back flared up. On their 50th anniversary, the town of San Jose threw them a celebration. They were local legends now, the mail-order bride and the cowboy who had built an empire of love and precision. The mayor gave a speech. The newspaper ran a feature article. Children who had grown up hearing their story looked at them with something approaching awe. But for Helena and Carter, the most meaningful part was simply being together, surrounded by the family and community they had nurtured over half a century. 50 years, Carter said that night, lying beside Helena in the bed they had shared for so long. We have been married for 50 years. Longer than some people live, Helena agreed. We have been so blessed. You have any regrets? Carter asked, a question that might have seemed dangerous but which held only genuine curiosity. Helena considered carefully. I regret the circumstances that forced me to leave Boston. I regret that my father did not live to see what I built here, to meet you and our children. But I do not regret a single choice I made after I answered your advertisement. Not one. I regret that I cannot give you more, Carter said quietly. That the ranch, successful as it is, was never the grand empire I dreamed of building for you. Helena turned to face him, her hand cupping his weathered cheek. You gave me everything that matters. Love, respect, partnership, family. Those are the only riches worth having. You made me whole, Carter whispered. I was half a person before you came. You completed me. And you gave me a place to belong, Helena replied. We saved each other. They made love that night with the tenderness of long practice, bodies that knew each other completely, hearts that beat in perfect synchronization. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they drifted into sleep with the contentment of people who had lived fully and loved well. Carter passed away peacefully 2 years later, at the age of 77, in the bed he had shared with Helena for over 5 decades. It was a quiet death, gentle as the man himself had been. He simply went to sleep beside her and did not wake up. Helena was devastated but not broken. She had loved him too well to dishonor that love with despair. Instead, she threw herself into ensuring his legacy continued. She worked with Charlie to establish the Carter Vaughn Memorial Scholarship, funding education for ranch families' children. She compiled their letters and journals into a memoir of their life together, which was published by a small press and became unexpectedly popular. She continued her clockmaking too, finding solace in the precision work that had always been her anchor. Her hands were unsteady now, but her mind remained sharp, and she focused on teaching, passing her knowledge to yet another generation of craftspeople. On what would have been their 55th anniversary, Helena stood at Carter's grave with their entire family around her. The headstone was simple, exactly as he would have wanted. Carter Thomas Vaughn, 1858–1935, beloved husband, father, grandfather, friend. "I still talk to him," Helena admitted to Grace, who had come from San Francisco for the occasion. "Every night I tell him about my day, about the family, about the world changing around us. I like to think he hears me." "I am sure he does," Grace said, wrapping her arm around her mother's shoulders. "The love you two shared does not simply end." "No," Helena agreed. "It transforms. It continues in our children and grandchildren, in the ranch, in the business, in the community you all build. Love is the most durable mechanism ever designed." Helena lived another 8 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She died at 80 in her workshop, a partially assembled watch on the table in front of her. Charlie found her slumped over her work, a gentle smile on her face, as if she had simply decided it was time to go. At her funeral, the church in San Jose was packed beyond capacity. 4 generations of family, countless apprentices and customers, community members whose lives she had touched in ways large and small. The eulogy was given by Henry, now a distinguished judge, and his words captured the essence of his mother's extraordinary life. "Helena Greenfield Vaughn came to California as a frightened young woman seeking refuge," he said. "She became a master craftswoman, a successful businesswoman, a beloved pillar of our community. But more than any of that, she was a woman who understood that precision and timing are not just mechanical concepts, but the foundation of a life well lived. She taught us to pay attention, to care about the small things, to build with intention and love." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "And she showed us what true partnership looks like. She and our father built something together that has outlasted them both. Not just a ranch or a business, but a family, a legacy of love and dedication that will continue for generations." Helena was buried beside Carter, their matching headstones a testament to 52 years of marriage and the 8 years she had lived carrying his memory. On her stone, the family added the inscription she had requested: "Helena Margaret Greenfield Vaughn, 1862–1942, clockmaker, wife, mother, friend." Her timing was perfect. The ranch continued under Charlie's stewardship, then passed to his children. The clockmaking business eventually became a small museum, preserving Helena's tools and designs, teaching new generations about the artistry of precision timekeeping. The Greenfield Vaughn name remained synonymous with quality for decades after Helena's death. But perhaps the truest legacy was the family itself. The descendants of Helena Greenfield and Carter Vaughn spread across California and beyond, carrying with them the lessons their ancestors had embodied. The value of precision, the importance of timing, the power of partnership, and the enduring strength of love freely chosen and carefully nurtured. In the end, their story was not just about a mail-order bride and a cowboy, though it was certainly that. It was about 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose to build something together despite uncertainty, who created a life of meaning and purpose through dedication and devotion. It was about understanding that timing brings opportunities, but people make choices. That precision in work reflects care in life. That love is not just a feeling but a practice, honed daily through countless small acts of consideration and commitment. The pocket watches Helena had made for their wedding, inscribed with precision and timing, were passed down through the family, eventually finding their way to a museum collection. But the lesson they embodied lived on in every generation. That life's most beautiful moments come when skill meets opportunity, when preparation meets chance, when two people find each other at exactly the right time and choose, every day, to stay together. Helena Greenfield had stepped off a stagecoach in San Jose, California, in 1885 with nothing but her tools and her courage. She had answered an advertisement from a stranger, gambling everything on the possibility of a better life. And she had found not just security or stability, but profound love, deep partnership, and a legacy that would endure long after her precisely crafted timepieces had stopped ticking. Her timing, in every sense, had been absolutely perfect.